Welcome back. Now 25 days to go until the midterm elections, and sky-high inflation remains one of the top issues for voters. President Biden is trying to spin the news, and of course it was worse than expected yesterday, but now he's claiming Republicans are actually the issue.
Today's report shows, though, some progress. Overall, inflation was 2% over the last 3 months. That's down from 11% over the prior 3 months. That's progress. Republican wins, inflation is going to get worse. It's that simple.
Joining me right now is Fox News contributor, former senior advisor to the Clintons and the Stagwell Group CEO, and the Harris Poll chairman, Mark Penn. Mark, great to see you. Thanks very much for being here this morning. He keeps blaming Republicans for everything, despite this horrendous policy. How important are these issues for the midterm elections now, Mark? Give us your sense of where polling is.
Well, we're coming out of the field with a Harris poll this morning, and inflation is the #1 issue, along with immigration and crime as 2 and 3. And 73% of the people now expect that we're going into a recession, and 55% blame President Biden and his policies for the inflation. So he may be trying to deflect it, but he really needs to meet it head on, take responsibility, and give a plan of action, because right now he is failing on that issue with the American public, no question about it.
Well, instead, he's actually misleading the American people every day with comments like it's the Republicans' fault. I mean, that's not going to fly, don't you think?
Well, yes, he keeps saying on the one hand there's inflation, then there's, as he said, there's just 2% inflation, or last month he said there was no inflation. I mean, his comments are just not credible on the issue. When we ask voters what issue are the Democrats talking about, they say January 6th. So when the public really wants to talk about inflation, immigration, and crime, the Democrats are seen as not really even playing on the main issues, and the president is not being credible about those issues or responding in a forceful way.
Right. Trump and abortion, Mark, it's Dagan McDowell. But these concerns that you talk about for voters and the disastrous state of the economy, is it actually playing out in the way that they will vote at the for Congress and for Senate? Because if it was a presidential election, that might be one thing. But are there concerns and the blame that the Democrats deserve, is it actually showing up in the numbers? Because if you look at the Senate, it's extremely tight between Republicans and Democrats in the the closely watched races, and even on the Republicans should be much further ahead, you would think, in the House races.
Well, CNN had a poll when they looked actually at the House races that are contested. They have Republicans ahead by 5 points, in those districts. Look, I think if you went back before Labor Day, I think Democrats had some momentum. I think since then, the momentum has clearly shifted. I think the biggest opportunity for Democrats would have been really a change in inflation, and we didn't see that. Quite the opposite. I think it's underscored as the most important issue. I think now we are seeing in the polls Democrats paying a price for the trillions of dollars that were spent coming out of the pandemic, for Biden's policies related to that and to energy. And I do think that you see the momentum here and the energy on the Republican side. And if you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I would have said the opposite.
Can I just add one thing? It's not just the blame and who caused the inflation and the declining wages. It's the fact that the Democrats can't acknowledge that it's a hardship. That there's a declining standard of living in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. We were going to show these competitive races, and I find it surprising that the Republicans are not actually winning more, given the fact that everywhere you look, there's another fire to put out. Joe Concha, jump in.
Well, that's exactly right. Obviously, Mark, the GOP will likely take back the House. They only have to flip something like 5 seats. Put it in contrast, you know about Bill Clinton, how he lost 54 seats in 1994. Barack Obama, 2010, lost 63. But to Dagan's point, in the Senate, Republicans are struggling. Is it because they're not articulating articulating what they would do differently in terms of solutions to inflation, to crime, we know the border. I think they've pretty much drawn a comparison there. But have Republicans, at least in terms of Senate candidates, been articulate enough as far as what their message is, what their bumper sticker is to improve matters in those big issues?
Well, look. I think some Republicans have, others haven't. Some Republicans came out, who were vulnerable, didn't seem as qualified, weren't as well known. You know that everybody in the planet is watching what's happening in Pennsylvania, and in Georgia, and in that Warnock seems to have strengthened, and Oz seems to have strengthened as well. No, these Senate races are not going to be a runaway. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent in some of these races.
Yeah.
People look a little bit more at the candidates. I think at the end of the day, there will be some voters who just vote on these issues regardless who the candidates are, and that's usually what happens if there's a wave. And we're getting closer to a wave here election as these polls edge up in the Republican direction.
We're getting closer to a wave election, you just said. Real quick, Joe.
Yeah, I have a quick one. What about energy policy? Are voters concerned about energy policy, how that's putting upward pressure on gasoline prices, as well as climate change? Do they have any passion about climate change?
Well, they do care about energy, but they do care more about energy independence right now, and would slow the transition from fossil fuels. Look, I think that inflation and energy and food prices are all playing together as the #1 issue, but immigration and crime are the 2 and 3 issues. When we ask them what are Democrats focusing on, January 6th, women's rights, climate change.
Yeah.
Climate change is an issue, women's rights is an issue, but neither of them are in the top 3, and January 6th is not in the top 5 or 10.
That's not going to pay the bills. Mark, good to see you. Thanks very much for being here this morning.